it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome back to Her Success Story, and thank you again for showing up. This is the kickoff for January, and this month is all about authors. It's truly my pleasure to highlight Marcia Butler. She has had a number of creative careers, including professional musician, interior designer, documentary filmmaker, and author. Marcia was an oboist and a New York Times hailed her as a first-rate artist. During her musical career, she performed as a principal oboist and soloist in the renowned New York and international stages with many high-profile musicians and orchestras. I can go on and on about that, but let me really tell you about another side of Marcia. Within the last 2 years, Marcia has become a nationally acclaimed author for her memoir of The Skin Above My Knee. It's one of top 10 noteworthy moments in classical music in 2017, said the Washington Post. She was chosen as the 2017 notable debut author in 35 and over 35. I can go on and on about Marcia's literary skills, her interior design skills, and her musical skills. But let me really tell you about the Marcia that I know and why I wanted to share with you today. See, Marcia and I go back a handful of years and then some. Marcia is an old client of mine and Slater Success. And Marcia came to me in a 2-day program and raised her hand and said, I'm an interior designer. And I said, great, we're going to do some inner work and some outer work, and we're going to talk about goals. And the next thing I knew, Marcia stood at the table and said, I truly want to be an author, and I make my living as an interior designer, so we're going to go with that. We went on to work for many months together, as well as form a bond and a friendship. So I want to introduce my friend, my colleague, and a woman I greatly admire for her guts, to always go with her heart, her creativity, and never to see an obstacle in her way. Marcia, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Ivy. That was a beautiful introduction, and I'm blushing here, but thank you so thank you so much for having me.
You know, Marcia and I were just chatting, and she goes, do you remember when I stood up and I said I was going to be an author? And what did you just say to me? Did you know what was coming out of your mouth?
You mean at the time?
Yes, at the time. Did you realize the impact of it?
No, and actually, as you said, I was there to sort of work through my issues as an interior designer, my challenges. And I think by the end of the workshop period, which was a couple of days, we got to this point where I was talking more and more about writing. And it was a surprise, actually, that I was actually verbalized. I'd like to write a book. That's my goal. I have a book in my head. I see myself, I want to have the courage to see myself as an author, because I was writing as for the interior design business on my blog, and that's how it started. So I decided, I'm going to write, trends and what people should do and sort of engage my clients. And I started writing more about more global creative ideas on my interior design blog. And that kind of started it. And I thought, well, I have more to say than red couch, blue couch, and yeah.
So I have to ask, because so many people say, I'm going to write a book one day. One day I'm writing a book. I have a book. I'm going to write a book. I have a book in me, Yeah, I could see myself writing everything down one day. How did you go from, you had an interior design business, if I recall, for about 15 years.
Yes.
You're a musician for?
About almost 30 years in New York City, yeah.
In New York City. Traveled the world doing that. How do you just pause and say, okay, in no uncertain terms, screw it all, I think I'll write a book? Now, I think today's the day I'm going to get started.
Right. It wasn't the day, it wasn't this is the day. It happened incrementally where I started writing these essays on my experiences as a performer on stage. What does that really feel like? How do you really, what does it feel like to sit on the stage of Carnegie Hall and look out there? And what goes on in an orchestra that the audience really isn't aware of, these subtle internal shifts that happen when many people are playing together. So I started writing about that, and I started writing about my, personal experiences as a child. And one day I actually did wake up at 5 a.m. and realized that I was writing a memoir. And that was not a happy experience because, of course, all the thoughts come through, who am I? And my silly little life, and who would ever want to read this book? And, just ideas of deficiency come up, of course. And I just pushed it all away and plowed through. And I was able to get an agent quickly, and I sold it to a big 5 publisher in 2 months.
Which is unheard of.
Well, it's heard of, but it's unusual.
It's unusual.
It was. I was very lucky. I always say that, but I worked my butt off as well.
There is no doubt, because I know, let's, digress from our normal, what we talk about here. But I want to bring forward, as both of us having backgrounds in performing arts and in the arts, you wake up every day, and it doesn't matter if your throat hurts, if your fingers hurt, if your feet hurt, there's practice to be done, and there's rehearsals to do, and there's performances to do, and you show up. And so I have no doubt when you dedicated yourself to actually becoming an author, you showed up in that light.
Yes, it's true, Ivy. I feel, of course, musicians are disciplined. That is something you just have to get on the instrument every day. And I think in the almost 30 years that I played, I think I might have taken 24 days off in all of those years. Even on holiday, I would play for about 45 minutes just to keep things feeling nice and good. However, I think the thing that I learned as a musician that I've brought through all my creative experiences as a musician, an interior designer, a writer, and also now working on a documentary film about creativity, is that musicians must sit down every day and address what they cannot do. Mm-hmm. So the concerts come every week, maybe several a week, and there's new music on the stand each time that we have not played before. Sometimes we have played them before, but we have to learn those notes fast. And so every day we walk into the studio and we basically have to do what we can't do and tolerate the feeling that we are not successful every day. And in other words, we just don't go in and do what we've done yesterday. We do what we have never done before, which is play those notes that we don't know. And musicians, and I have learned to be comfortable with that feeling of discomfort. And it's something that if you're not in the arts, it's easier, much easier to kind of walk away from it, to procrastinate, to push it aside, go to something that feels more comfortable and in your wheelhouse. But as musicians, we can't do that. And the reason that we can't is we have to play the music beautifully and perfectly. And so I brought that discipline and that feeling of, I know I can't do this now, but I will be able to do it tomorrow and the next day. So that's kind of how I wrote.
So when, what motivated you to say, okay, so now I'm an interior designer. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I'm still doing it, and I still have my clients, and there's some client expansion, etc. And I'm now starting to write, I'm starting to write to shift from and take the leap of faith. And it's not the first time you did that, of I'm going to make a living here. I'm going to support myself by doing this. I'm going to trust in the leap.
Right.
I mean, bottom line, that's scary.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it is. And, you know, I always say I've never had a day job in my life. So yes, when I was in college, I worked in a restaurant, sure, like everybody back in the 70s. But once I started in my profession as a musician and began to quickly make my living fully from it, and in interior design, I never had to supplement my income with something else. So, and I think the reason I was able to do that, and this isn't answering your question about the courage to just move forward and leap, is that the thing that was pushing me was not the money. It was the thing and the process. It was music, and then it was design, and then it was the words. And those things to me are greater than a monetary reward. Now, mind you, I like to live well like everybody else. I've never made a lot of money, but I've supported myself in New York City for 40 years. Fully. And I guess you have to be reasonable in your choices about when you do these things, but it's really about the thrust of wanting to do things that are bigger than you in a way, and are bigger than just making a living. And you see, that's always the carrot in front, always, is the integrity of what you do, I think, of what one does. Yeah.
And, you know, let's not make light. You know, people listen to her success story around the country, around the world. Being able to live in New York City and support yourself with a Manhattan lifestyle is not the same as living in many, many other parts. So it is a degree of financial success, no matter what. Because
yes,
let's own that.
Yes, and thank you for that. That said, you know, I live like a church mouse now. You know, I don't live the lifestyle that I did 10 years ago, but that's my choice. I can still live. You know, you know, you have to shift and morph into what the world is bringing you. And that includes being realistic about finances. And so I'm smart, I'm frugal, you know, I play by my own rules. And
well, I think I would probably throw out the word frugal, and I would probably say you're smart and you have your priorities at this time in order.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what you're dedicated to, and that's how you live.
Yeah, and the irony is as an interior designer, you know, I designed spaces and environments for people, and part of that is acquiring things for, you know, purchasing for clients, and you know, filling their home with lovely objects that are going to, you know, make them feel good within their space, and no matter what they wanted to do. But the irony of all that is that now in my life, I'm 63, I have almost no attachment to things anymore. Almost none. I can see myself opening the window across the room right now, opening up the window and throwing stuff out the window even now. It's just, things are not that meaningful for me anymore.
That I respect. So tell me, owning your career as an author, as a documentary filmmaker now, what are some of your new challenges? What are you learning in this craft? What can you share with us?
In writing,
yes.
Particularly? Freedom. You know, 2 years ago, I published my memoir, which was all about the navel gazing, of course. And it was basically how music saved my life, and was the story of my childhood, and then how I heard music at 4 years old, and it absolutely saved me from a lot of trauma going on. And so I put that down. I put all of those stories down and crafted a memoir. And then once that was sold, I immediately went to fiction. I saw myself as a writer, and I wanted the freedom to imagine stories and people that were not me and not my life. And so now with this, my novel coming out in April, which is called Pickle's Progress, it opened up my mind. I was no longer constricted by the story that I knew, which was my own story, but by the stories that I was going to discover, which are in my imagination. And I can make up these people, and they can be reckless, and they can be wonderful, and they can be loving, and they can be hateful, and they can be everything, and they can be set anywhere in the world. And they can interact with each other in ways that only I could imagine. And so it's really about freedom of my mind. I'm not playing notes on a page that someone has composed. I'm not making an environment that is for a client, which is dictating things to me. But I'm writing fully from imagination. And that has been awesome.
So you take a creative soul who's had a variety of different careers based on your creativity, and you stepped into now an environment that you can 100% unleash, no limitations on your creativity.
Yes. The only limitations I have is the following, that when a writer writes, we are always, fiction, for instance, we are always aware that we are writing from the prism of our own psychology. So clearly, my experience as a human being from age 1 to 63 is always going to be the lens through which I imagine my worlds. But when I know that, I can also go through the process of writing and understand, oh, that's me, and push it aside so that I can clear that deck. And I don't want to write that kind of person again, who I know and I'm comfortable with. I want to make up someone who is so foreign to me. So we have to always be aware of that prism, that lens that the writer is writing through, and be willing to go into an area that is completely unknown again and again and again, day after day, really.
So in transitioning, have there been unique challenges that you didn't expect? You know, in stepping into your brilliance as an author, of, you know, stepping into your 60s and saying, okay, in this decade, I'm going to.
Right. Oh, goodness. You know, in every art form, there's heartbreak. What can I say? My goodness, it's not all just the best, you know, little world in the world. I would say the surprising and challenging part of writing and publishing is that once the thing is out there, you have absolutely no control over how it is received. And thank God I've gotten good reviews, but and how it will actually fare, you know, in the marketplace as a book. Will it sell well? Will it not? Can you even sell your next book? It's not a slam dunk.
Right.
And so once the thing is out of your hands, you know, literally off your computer and into your agent's hand or whatever, and it tries to be sold, and, you know, then a publishing house gets it. And then a year and a half later, it's out in the marketplace. It's almost like it's a UFO, and it's floating out of your house, and you're reaching your hands out and you're trying to grab it back, but you can never get it back because it's never yours again. It's the public's, it's the publishing houses, and then it's the public's and you're glad that people are reading it, but it is so disembodied from you. And that's not like being a musician where there's always another concert and you're always redefining yourself in your art form as a musician. I was an oboist. With all the concerts that you play every week. And in interior design, it's like each client after next, and you're working multiple clients. It's still yours in your hands, but with a book, it's out there, and it's a very unique feeling. I've never experienced that before, where you really are just it's like an infant stretching your hands. Don't go away, mommy. I still want you. And mommy's got to go to work or whatever. But that's been challenging, is the reality of your small, precious product being out, gone.
So what has surprised you in this process?
That I still have the urge to write every day. And I'm very grateful for that. I haven't had a downtime of just sort of like, well, nothing's coming, you know, I don't know what to do, you know, where is this going? I haven't written in 3 weeks. No, that is surprising to me, that I really try to get on the page one way or the other every day, whether it's now I'm doing Q&As for, you know, to prepare for the publication of my book. I'm doing podcasts, I'm doing all manner of things. I'm editing my documentary film. But I have another novel, which is almost finished, first draft. So I'll go back to that when I finish, preparing for my first novel to come out. So the surprising thing for me personally is that I still got some stuff to say, I think. And I'm still motivated, highly motivated to get on the page every day, which is a blessing, believe me.
I think that's amazing, because years ago when I started writing my blog, I did it under massive protest. And I remember sharing this with you. I was like, oh my goodness. But I always said, oh, Marcia, you know, I think you should get out and like, we should talk marketing, write copy and stuff. You're like, you were so open to it. And I was like, God bless you. I hated this transition. And I'm on my second book. It's coming out later in January. And there's every time I'm like, okay, I have to get myself into a quiet place and I have to get ready to write as opposed to just go write. And for me, it's a much more challenging art form than what my husband called me out the other day. We're in the elevator coming up to our own apartment. He goes, is that a dance step? I'm like, oh, sorry. You know, like, and I just find myself just doing certain things, certain times. It's 30 years later. And my body just does things. For writing, it's something that is a conscious effort. Once I'm in flow, I'm in flow. So I greatly admire and respect that you say that you're surprised that every day it's like, yep, ready to go. I think that's amazing.
Well, I do feel lucky. And of course, one is always fearful that it'll go away, like tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing about fiction, is it's not about me, which is a blessing. And the books that you're writing, you're very much pulling from your experience, from your expertise, from your knowledge, your, you know, just doing what you're doing all these years. And how can you, you know, share that with the world? And I don't have to be an expert in my fiction area. You know, that's the thing, is that I don't have to know, like, I don't have to be a Bedouin in a desert to write about write my character as a Bedouin in a desert. You know, it's a little bit different. And it's both, of course, have deep challenges.
So I want to ask you this, and I always ask, you know me very well, and I strong believer in the relationships and the journey of like being on this podcast today together. We've known each other a whole bunch of years, and we're here both in different spaces than we originally met, but we still kept our relationship going. In your career paths, in your businesses, in your in being a leader in that way, has there been any specific relationships that you have noticed that have actually traveled with you or made an unusual impact when you look back and reflect?
Yes, there are so many people who inspired me throughout the years, but I'll just hone it in on one person, who was Elliott Carter, the American composer, who died a few years ago, but when I was a musician, I was fortunate enough, and I write about this in my memoir, I was fortunate enough to play his oboe concerto, which is one of the most difficult pieces ever written for oboe. And he lived in New York City. He's a very esteemed American composer, and it was kind of like I was working with a superstar, really, to play this piece. But that was the first time that I had played a piece that I actually felt worried that I couldn't conquer. Even I had 6 months to prepare it. Even in month 3.5, I was thinking, I got to back out of this because I can't play this thing. And I made it. I played it. It was a successful performance. And I think that was the seminal moment where I realized that there is a person who can put something in your path that is meant for you to be better, much better than you were before it was put in your path. And that piece was a vehicle for me to not only become a better oboe player, but to become a person who understood that difficulties don't hold you back. They push you forward. And I just didn't give up. And believe me, I wanted to call them and say, I can't do it. So many times I cannot tell you. And so Elliot Carter, of course, was not aware that I was freaking out for 6 months about his piece. And I would never, ever, ever disclose that to him. And I ended up playing numerous pieces of his and had a wonderful, collegial, lovely, warm relationship with him. But he really was the person who put it in my path. And I was able to, I don't even know how I did that. So I did it, though. And that was a very important relationship for me.
What tips, advice do you have for our listeners out there? And it can come from a couple of different places. It could come from, embracing your place and being an author today. And it could come from the place of transition and being, the leader you are to take the leaps of faith and have the guts to go for your heart and what's important to you.
Right. I think everybody in the world is searching for a place to go forward. You've landed wherever you are on a particular day and you have dreams. And the main thing I think that is important for people who have dreams, and everybody does, they can be small, they can be personal, they can be in business, anything, is to not eschew the feeling of discomfort. That in discomfort is an opportunity to explore and to dissect, and to then by doing that, you distill the discomfort. And when you understand your own momentary discomfort, daily discomfort that lasts over several weeks and you can't get through it, it can show up as depression, it can show up as irritation, it can show up as anger, is when you look at it straight at it and stay in it, it will go away and you will learn something from it. And through that, you will be one step farther toward your goal. That's my advice, is to not look away from difficulty and discomfort. That it's there, it's put in your path to learn something about yourself. And that's the only way we can move forward, is when we learn about ourselves.
That happens to be so true. The way forward is through ourselves, and it's through willing to take the steps that are not always the most comfortable ones. So here's I'm going to share a short story based on that because I think it's relevant. When I had decided to open Slater's Success back in the day, and this is in 2007, before I opened the doors in 2008, I had a meeting with my accountant and my attorney, as the logical Ivy Slater businesswoman would do. And I said, I'm doing this and I'm about to open this business and that, where I'm going to digress of Slater Graphics. And my accountant went ballistic. He goes, what do you think you're doing? You have 2 kids to go to college in a few years. You're going to throw away an income of blank, blank, and blank. You're never going to make any money. And went on and on. Literally, we were at a conference table and got up to yell. Didn't just sit down to yell, just got up to yell. Yeah. So, and I moved forward with what was right in my heart and my gut. And when you do that and you make the commitment, just as you're saying, Marcia, what is possible is greatness for the impact you make as a woman, the impact you make as an author, as an artist, and the greatest joy of self-fulfillment. So cheers to you, my friend.
Thank you, Ivy. It was a great pleasure to speak with you.
So for the listeners out there, everything's going to be in the show notes. You want to check out The Skin Above My Knee, Marcia Butler's book that has been out there. Her new book, mark your calendars for April, where you're going to have Pickle's Progress that will be released on April 9th from Central Avenue Publishing. You want to reach Marcia, her contact information, you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The woman you want to be connected to. She is a leader among leaders because she's a leader who takes the risks and lives in fulfillment, which is something I greatly admire about you. Thank you for being here. You like what you're hearing? Leave a response, leave a comment. We're here to give you more great content. Please remember to subscribe, sign up, and we'll see you next week on Her Success Story.